Ethics really are like muscles, and they need to be exercised regularly. I think what Oasis says, by the way, is they're kind of like simpler and to the point. So some of the codes of ethics for people are 25 pages. For Oasis, much briefer, and we'll go through them today. We'll look at the most common violations. Hopefully this will be interesting as well, but this, by the way, this is not a gray area. This is black and white. Somebody wrote in, it's like having a client by day and serving him drinks by night because you are a bartender. Yeah, so look at what your second job is. I always tell people, if you have to follow the ethics during the day and then you're a bartender, and everybody looks at bartenders, by the way, as counselors, and sometimes people tell people lots of things. You have to be aware of what your day job is. By the way, in sensitive terms, I would also put in terminology around LGBT people, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and people of transgender experience, because that is another situation where sometimes people think it's okay to say things. So let people know, but know yourself. And we always talk about having our belly barometer, and we kind of explain it as when something happens and your stomach turns, pay attention to it. All right, thank you for the person who just wrote in. I provided my coworker with Language Matters from Oasis, and when the coworker would call individuals with mental illness crazy people and Looney Tunes, I was told she is from an older generation and let it go. Ooh. I'll speak from my own experience or what I hear. Sometimes people have like this older uncle who's really racist and people let him get away with it because he's 85. You can figure out what you want to do with your home life. But again, if somebody is working in a facility and has to follow a code of ethics, then language, remember yesterday we always have that piece on language, and when you think about people with mental illness, the terms that are used, and if you're told to let it go, I feel sorry. I feel sad about that, because one of the things that can happen when you talk about respecting a client and you hear another counselor talk down to somebody using racial and ethnic slurs, ouch, that's one of those ouches. So it also would give the message to the client like, oh, what kind of agency is this? Because one of the things too is if you have a colleague who consistently, and I'm thinking about colleagues, by the way, it could be like friends and family, but in this case we're talking about work, that if they are using racial and ethnic slurs, that makes me very uncomfortable that everybody would know that and that would be okay. So I think people start off getting away with things and then it gets out of hand. It's interesting because I think in other fields, sometimes when people relapse, it's kept quiet. In our field, everybody tends to know. So we also know that learning occurs from modeling. So what they see you do, and that's why also you have to follow ethics, because your clients will do what you do, not what you tell them to do. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that just because somebody's in recovery doesn't mean you're going to be a good counselor, but I'm going to say that here's the thing to keep in mind is recovering counselors, for those of you in recovery, you know that you really are in a position to be role models. And also, I think it's important to kind of look at how you what you do publicly. So you may be, for example, speaking publicly about your job, or actually now being on a podcast or being on any kind of social media, but to kind of know what you can do and what you can't do. So the CASAC must adopt a personal and professional stance which promotes the well-being of the recovery community. Can't keep that stuff secret. I think sometimes it gets tricky when people are dealing with their friends and colleagues that they like. So just be aware of, again, the possibility that you are doing harm or others are. So, and potentially places patients at risk. So this is a tricky one because sometimes as people, let's say a counselor relapses or is impaired in other ways, your ethics, by the way, and I know people don't like to snitch on other people, but it's really important that you don't hide those kind of things.